Do you need to change the oil and oil filter on your Polo 1.2 3-cylinder or any VW with the same 1.2 3-cylinder engine? Stay tuned, let me show you how. Raise the front of the car a little. You could use a jack and axle stands. I'm using caravan ramps. Put the handbrake tight on and chock a rear wheel. Access to the oil filter housing is massively improved if you remove the air box from the top of the engine. If you're not sure how to do that, I will link to my air filter change video down in the description of this one. Remove the oil filler cap and the dipstick. The engine should be warm. Put it up on your stands or your ramps after a short drive, at least 5 or 6 miles, or maybe a journey home from work, and then make your preparations allowing the oil to drain into the sump whilst you're doing so. It also allows it to cool a little because the oil is very hot. It'll be around 80 degrees C or so, and if you can leave it for 20 minutes before you drain it, then that'll just help the temperature to settle and there'll be less chance you'll burn yourself. The hex on the oil filter cap is 36mm across flats. Now, because of its position on the front right corner of the engine, just down below the locking platform, you actually cannot get a socket straight onto it. So you'll need a 36mm spanner, or I actually use a pair of pipe grips. Once you've loosened the cap, you should be able to undo it by hand. Be careful, it is hot. Carefully lift the cap, which should come complete with filter, out, and bring a cloth to catch the drips. The reason for doing this first rather than draining the sump first is that in the cap there is an integral pressure valve for pressure relief, and when you remove the cap and the valve complete as an assembly, that allows oil in the oil pump and in the housing here to drain back into the sump. We'll come back to that. Set it down somewhere safe for the moment. The engine mount bracket actually makes a good place to rest the oil filter cap whilst you're working down below. Underneath you'll need a 6mm hex to undo the sump plug, which hopefully won't be too tight. Position your oil drain pan, undo the sump plug and allow the oil to drain. Back up top, whilst the oil's draining, a little old oil stays in the filter housing. So I like to just dribble a little new oil into there to wash it away. That'll drain back through the oil pump into the sump. It'll also take some of the last oil out of the sump along with it. Now it's time to put the new oil filter in the filter cap. With a 4mm screwdriver or other flat blade, push the blade between the pleats and just use it to lift the old filter out of the cap. And with a sharp knife, cut the O-ring that's round the top of the cap. Personally, I find that a simpler way of removing the O-ring, and also it means that you cannot mix up the new O-ring with the old one. Place a new O-ring, just rub round it ever so slightly with a little bit of oil on your fingers, and replace the oil filter with a new one. And return the oil filter into its housing. The torque specified for this is 25 Newton meters, but I've never found that to be particularly critical, so just do it up good hand tight. Like with the oil filter housing, before we put the air box back on and finally put the sump plug back in, I like to just tip a little fresh oil into the top, let it drain into the sump and drain out the bottom. Not much, about a mug full will do. That has the benefit of washing fresh oil over the timing chain and all its workings, and washing away any residual dirt and old oil that may be in the timing case. If you look closely, you'll see that the hole that the oil drains out of at the bottom of the sump isn't actually right at the very bottom. Even if you allow the oil to reduce to a drip drip drip, there'll always be a little bit of old oil left right at the very bottom of the sump, just pooled behind the drain plug hole there. So that's partially the benefit of tipping a little fresh oil into the oil filter housing and the filler cap. As it drains over the components through the oil pump and over the timing chain, it also drains into the sump and brings the pooled old oil with it. The sump plug comes with a copper washer. Inspect the condition of the washer. I would suggest replacing it every other time you do an oil change. If it's the first time you've ever done an oil change on the car because it's new to you, then replace it. They're easy and cheap to get from pretty much any motor factors. Having put the sump plug back in and torqued it up to the required 30 Newton meters, or good hand tight as I prefer, I like to use a measuring jug to pour the oil into the top of this engine. If you actually look in the hole there is an obstruction in the way that it's designed. There's a sort of spiral that the oil has to go down, which means that you can't just tip it in real fast. So now, depending on exactly which version of the 1.2 engine you've got, the engine takes either 2.4 or 2.8 litres of oil. So what I do is I fill with 2.5 litres, run it, and then check the oil level on the dipstick and add more if necessary. You see here, if I try to pour it in too quickly, it backs up into the cap hole. So go gentle with it. The drip catcher around the oil cap is rubber and can be lifted off quite easily for a clean out or a spray down with brake cleaner. Put the oil cap back on, return the dipstick to its hole, and replace the air box. I wouldn't suggest starting the car with the air box removed. That'll allow your engine to breathe in unfiltered air, and you just don't know what might be floating around in the air. I mean, we've got a building site across the road from us, so there's all sorts of dirt particles and pollen floating around here. And now you can start up. Let the engine run at a natural idle speed, don't rev it, let it run for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and then shut it down. Drop the car back onto the ground level. Once it's level on the ground, allow the engine to stand for a couple of minutes, then check the oil level and top up if necessary. And that's it. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, smash that like button. Don't forget to add your comments as well in the comments section below. We want to hear your input. Maybe helps other viewers. And I'll see you next time.